All right, viewers, I welcome you to another episode of Learning. All right, in our previous video, you will recall that we were able to consider the various types of questions on comprehension. And you will recall we said we have six basic types of questions. Number one, the direct reference question, the inference question, that is number two, the supposition question, the figurative question, and we also have the grammatical question making number five. And lastly, we have the contextual question. The contextual question. So now, today we want to look at the step-by-step approach to answering questions, all these questions we've mentioned on the comprehension. To start with, you need to know you know, what comprehension stands to do. Comprehension is a passage, is to test students' understanding on a particular passage, to check the level of your understanding of a particular passage, to see if truly you've been able to understand the written passage and how you've been able to interpret such passage. So I always go against the idea of running down to the questions before reading a passage. It is always advisable to, read a passage, then you go to the questions, and then you come back to the passage. So there are three basic types of reading: the first, the second, and the third reading. The first reading involves the skimming. You just skim through to get probably the basic idea of what the entire passage is all about. And then you go to the questions, you read all the questions. Now you go back to your passage, you engage in a thorough reading. That is, you are reading to get the main idea, to get the subject matter, the mind of the writer, to know what is in the mind of the writer, the purpose of the writing, and what the writing focuses or stands to address. So that is the second reading. And the third reading is reading to bring out those points. You underline some words, phrases, figurative expressions, and some difficult words will also be ironed out, and your ability to interpret them contextually matters a lot. There are some questions then that are coming up that demands your personal opinion, your being expressed in your own words. So all these are the areas you need to focus on as far as comprehension passage is concerned. So you don't just go straight to the questions. Ensure you have your own personal interpretation, your own basic knowledge of what the entire passage is all about. So far, so good. We are going to consider a sampled passage today as we look into the step-by-step approach to answer questions on the comprehension. So we are going to have a sampled passage, from the past questions, the wide past questions, and we are going to read it now, and then we'll practice some questions. We'll answer some practice questions, related. I'm going to read this passage here, and we'll follow, and thereafter we answer the questions that follow. It's going to be so simple, and I want you to take note of every detail and the steps we are going to take in answering the questions that follow. But the first thing is for us to have an understanding of what the entire passage is all about. So once we are done with the reading, then we try to interpret the passage, and then we go into our questions. Now, the first thing we do now is to read. Returning home after a decade and a half abroad, a geography master remained incurably addicted to foreign ways and ideas for years after landing here. He would forever stick to his theory of African suffering from a curse inflicted on them by the Almighty God for some heinous sins committed centuries ago. He would, in support of this theory, ask Listeners, why will a mosquito inflict deadly malaria on us, whereas the British mosquito does not bite? Why hence there are poisonous snakes in Britain, whereas here most snakes are deadly? Why should the deadly sickle cell disease be peculiar to the black race? Of course, he hardly waits for answers to these and similar questions before jumping to the same inevitable conclusion. However, he met his match one day when a new student joined the class and heard the litany we were used to. The new boy calmly said, "Sir, I happen to know a few white men who suffer from the sickle cell disease. Some are Italians and some are Spanish. The mosquito is usually deadly in India, Southeast Asian countries, and South America. The United States and some other South American countries have their deadly snakes. And sir, I know many white men, some of them British, who will prefer a brilliant sunshine to their horribly cold winter." And he sat down. I had never before that day seen a master so consumed with anger. He directed a burning look at the poor boy, who had no answer to this new battle. Without much as saying a single word, the master stalked out of the classroom. Needless to say, our anger was turned on this new boy, who had decided to row the boat without taking the time to sound the water. A delegation was sent to the master to apologize to him. He was appeased, but we all noticed something rather unusual thereafter. Never again did he dwell on the issue of African being the accursed people. Now, as a student, you are supposed to read this passage, you go to the questions, and then you read the passage once and again or twice for basic understanding of what the subject matter is all about. Let me just quickly read the questions here to your hearing. The first one is, what point of view is the geography master found of advancing? Second question, mention the three arguments he uses to support his view. The third one, what extra arguments did the new boy offer after countering each of the master's points? The fourth one, why do you think these masters fought back with his look rather than with further argument? The second but last question here, we have rock the boat. What figure of speech is this expression? And lastly, we have what does it mean? And lastly, we have what had had no answer to this, who had no answer to this new battle. What is the grammatical name and the grammatical function? All right, so now you've read the questions. It is expected of you to go back to the passage, read the passage, and while reading the passage, you are looking for the main idea, you're looking for the subject matter, you're looking for, the main points in the passage, and also, details that are also peculiar related to the questions we have asked here. And you're also reading to have a basic understanding, more understanding of what the passage is all about. Now, let's just say we've read it. And for the second time, we are going back to read it. Now, what is the passage all about? The passage is all about a geography teacher who had spent a decade and a half, that's 10.5 years, abroad. And he came, it is so common with some people once they come back, begin to intimidate others with the idea, the foreign ideas. And then he begins to compare African as a country with Europe. And he was able to establish three basic arguments. And number one argument was the fact that he said, why was our mosquitoes here found of causing or inflicting malaria on us compared to the mosquitoes over there in Europe that are found to be friendly? And number two argument was the fact that the snakes here are more venomous compared to the snakes in Europe. And last argument was the fact that there is an absence of sickle cell disease in Europe compared to African, that Africans are, plagued with that disease of sickle cell, and which is probably erroneous. It's an erroneous idea. And with this, he believed that Africa is a cursed continent. That is, we are suffering, that is, African is suffering from the curse from the Almighty God. So this had been his system, his style, his method of teaching. Most times he would deviate from his teaching and, begins to compare, the system in Africa with the European countries. Not until they welcome a new boy in the class, and that new boy who stood up to counterattack those points with his own argument. And what are those arguments the new boy used? He said, I happen, he said, of course, we have some points. The new boy calmly said, sir, I happen to know a few white men who suffer from sickle cell disease. That is, sickle cell disease is not peculiar to Africans. We have some, men, we have few men, European white, that are also suffering from sickle cell. And he said he was even able to establish with evident points enough. He says Italians and some are Spanish. He says some of them are Italians and some of them are Spanish. And they also mentioned the fact that mosquito is equally deadly in India. Not only in Africa, it's equally deadly in India, Southeast Asian countries, and South America. So with those points, and he was also able to establish the fact that there are some venomous snakes that are also found in South America. So with those 3 points, he was able to, counterattack the points made by the geography teacher with the notion that all those things were common to African as a continent, but not to European countries. And not only that, he added this point to it by saying, sir, I even know many white men, some of them British, who will prefer a brilliant sunshine to their horrible cold winter. So that is, aside all the 3 arguments mentioned by the geography teacher, there is something that you fail to remember. There are some European citizens that will prefer our, hot weather compared to their cold winter. So by implication, this goes with an axiom that says one man's food is another man's poison. What you appreciate, what you do not appreciate, what you don't appreciate, there are some other people that do really appreciate it. So you should learn, that is just a summary of the entire passage. You should learn how to appreciate, to value what you have with you. And since then, the man left the class, angrily, and the entire members of the class, they directed their grievance, their anger towards this boy, not until when a delegate was sent by the class members to appease the geography teacher. And since then, the geography teacher learned his lesson. He will never for once again mention the fact that, Africa is an accursed continent. So we have been able to interpret the entire passage and what the passage is all about. So directly or indirectly, we have the background knowledge of what the passage is all about. That we should learn to appreciate what belongs to us, and we should not see Africa as an accursed nation. That what we see as disadvantages here, most times they see those things as advantage over there. So we should learn to appreciate what belongs to us. So that is just a summary of the passage. Now, having known that, we'll go back to our questions. But remember, I said you engage in the reading 3 times. The first reading, the skimming. The second reading, you are reading to know the subject matter, to know the points, you know the idea. And the third reading, you are reading to interpret and also to answer the questions as asked, following the passage. Now, here are the few questions we have as far as the passage is concerned. What point of view is the geography master found of advancing. This is a direct reference question. It's a direct reference. What point of view? And the point of view, as mentioned by the geography teacher, is this that Africa is caused, that Africa is cursed, that Africa is caused, or that Africa is an accursed continent, or that Africa has been caused by the Almighty God. And the second question, you can see I may not even necessarily read the passage. I already have the basic knowledge of what the question is and what the answer should be based on my interpretation. And the second question will mention the three arguments he uses to support his point. What are the three arguments he uses to support his point? We can find those arguments from the second, from the first paragraph. He said, he will forever stick to this theory of African suffering from the curse inflicted on them by the Almighty God. Look at those points. He says, why will a mosquito inflict deadly malaria on us, whereas the British mosquito does not bite? So the number one argument is that mosquito in Africa, mosquito in Africa, mosquitoes in Africa are deadly, while they are not in Europe. That's number one. Remember, you are asked to mention three arguments. Arguments, most times it appears in form of comparison. Take note. So mosquitoes in Africa are deadly while they are not in Europe. And we have the snakes in Africa are deadly or poisonous. The snakes in Africa are deadly and poisonous. The snakes in Africa are deadly and poisonous, but those in Britain are harmless. But those in Britain are harmless. And number three argument, you can see that from the last one there, which says, the aspect of the sickle cell disease to be peculiar to the black race, being peculiar to the black race. So sickle cell disease is peculiar. Sickle cell disease is peculiar to the black race. Those are the you have to mention. You can see you don't need to lump them up by using and coordinating conjunction. Some people will say mosquitoes in Africa are deadly and the snakes in Africa are also deadly. Now you've been able to lump 2 points together and you will be given just 1 mark rather than 2 marks. So that's why most students, they fail, to answer questions on comprehension correctly in exams. So take note, I was able to bring out those 3 points since I was asked to mention 3 points. The next question says, what extra arguments did the new boy offer after countering each of the points? You remember that the boy was able to counter all those points leveled by the geography teacher, but he was also able to add additional point. And what was the additional point? You can find that in the tail end of the second paragraph, which says, it says the And sir, I know many white men, some of them British, who will prefer a brilliant sunshine to their horribly cold weather. He says many white men prefer weather. So we can have the C part. Many white men prefer uh, weather condition. Harsh weather condition. They prefer weather condition than theirs. Many white men prefer African sunshine. They prefer African weather condition, than theirs or than their cold weather. So, many white men prefer a weather condition than theirs, that is, than their cold weather condition. So that was an additional point leveled by the new boy. And the fourth question is, why do you think his master fought back with his look rather than the further argument? I know you should be able to answer that question. Why did the master, why do you think, now this, why do you think is an example, it's not an example of a direct reference question. If you are expected to have your personal interpretation, you are expected to, suppose, think, interpret from the lines of the passage. Why do you think it may not be directly written in the passage? Why it couldn't, or why the master fought back with his look, but you were able to suppose, interpret from the way the lines are joined. So you have to look at the connectivity between those, among those lines. So that will give you a direct answer to what the question. So why do you think his master fought back with his look rather than with further argument? His master could not answer, or does not have an answer to the question. His master does not have an answer, or you can say his master does not have any point against his argument. His master does not. Why do you think? So remember the use of do, which is present tense, and we're answering the question with present tense. His master does not have any valid point against his argument. Any valid, you can put valid. Any valid point against his argument. And the fifth question, rock the boat. What figure of speech is that? You can see that from the third paragraph. It says, we have who had decided to rock the boat without taking the time to sound the water. So it is a kind of comparison. He say he did not do this. So rather than using that particular, he did not, it says who had decided to rock the boat, who had decided to cause problem, who had decided to conflict the peace of the class, who had decided to cause problem in the class. So rather than using the word cause problem, he said who had decided to rock the boat. So we are using rock the boat to replace, cause to affect the peace of the class, to disrupt the class or to disturb the peace of the class. So it is a metaphoric. Why do we call it metaphor? Because it is replacing disturbing of one's peace. So since it is replacing it, remember a metaphor is an indirect comparison, an indirect comparison. So we have to rock the boat there. We have metaphor, metaphor, that is to rock the boat. And what does it mean? To disrupt peace. It means to disrupt peace, to disrupt peace of something, or someone, to disrupt peace, to cause problem, to disrupt peace. So the boy rocked the boat. And the next question, who had no answer to the new battle? Who had no answer to the, in our previous classes, we were able to consider what an adjectival clause is. It qualifies the noun. It talks more about the noun. And I told you there are different ways in which you can recognize adjectival clauses. And you can always go to those videos, watch them and try as much as possible. You understand what the concept is all about. Now, look at the way it is being used here to rock the boat. I mean, who had no answer to this new battle? Now, we have, he directed a burning look at the poor boy. He directed a burning look at the poor boy who had no answer to this new battle. So, who had no answer is referring to the poor boy. He's giving us details about the poor boy. So, what is that? The grammatical name there is relative. Another word for adjectival clause is relative clause. We can say relative clause or adjectival clause. And the grammatical function is it qualifies the noun phrase, the poor boy. It qualifies the noun phrase, the poor boy. So we have been able to answer the various categories of questions under this passage, step by step. The more you practice, the better you become. Try as much as possible. You have some other sample passages, practice them, read them, and answer the questions that follow. If you have any questions as for what we have treated here, you're free enough to drop in our comment section. And also remember that we have different types of questions as we have treated here. We have the direct reference question, it is treated. We have the inference question, it is treated. The supposition question, what do you think? It has been treated. We have the figurative question, which is asked to ask questions on figurative meaning, which is metaphor and the meaning. It has been treated. The grammatical question, which has to do with the grammatical usage in the passage, it has been treated. We are left with one aspect of question that we are yet to treat, which is the contextual usage of words. Words, meaning, synonyms, and all the likes as it is being used in the passage. In our subsequent class, I will teach you how to, take note of words as it is being used in a passage and how to find another word and some of the pitfalls, some of the things that students must avoid while answering questions under the contextual usage of words in the passage. Until then, I remain the amazing instructor. Try as much as possible. You subscribe to our channel, click on the notification bell, follow all our social media pages, and try to subscribe and follow us. You can share this video with others and let them learn. Help our students today, to learn one or two things. Till then, I remain the amazing instructor. I say bye.